Wonderful. What a joy to be with all of you, especially having this national audience. Oh my gosh, what a special thing to be that Zoom has made it possible for us to gather here.
Yes.
So everybody here I know knows Danny, but on the off chance that anyone needs a reminder, I will give the formal bio and then the informal bio. Danny, of course, is a well-known author, lecturer, and poet, and he has served as the tzedakah resource person on the United Synagogue Youth Israel Pilgrimage for more than 4 decades. He's the author of nearly 30 books, including Where Heaven and Earth Touch, an anthology of Midrash and Halacha, and of course, his newest book, which I have here since we're holding up books to the screen, Radiance. Julia, if you want to pop that link into the chat box for folks who do not yet have this spectacular volume, it is a gem, like all of Danny's books. The informal is that I was privileged to serve as one of Danny's Ziv Tzedakah interns in Israel, not 1, but 2 summers. The summer of
1923 and
1994, which makes me like not even an old friend on this Zoom call. I'm like a new friend. 1994 and again in 1996, I believe. I might have gotten those years mixed up, but close enough. In any case, I think I was 18 when I met Danny, and I now have an almost 18-year-old. So it's incredibly special to be gathered here again and to have been your student all these many years. There is a beautiful vignette in the introduction to Danny's newest book, Radiance, written by Neil Gold, who is also a rabbi. And did he finish his PhD, Danny?
No.
Okay, on the way. And Neil and I actually served together twice as Danny's interns. Neil well. And Neil describes in his beautiful introduction a scene on the Jerusalem sort of main drag called Ben Yehuda. I'm sure it's familiar to many of us. And describes a scene where we were sitting at a restaurant and around the table were young rabbinical students. I was just a college student at that time, but probably wearing shorts and a tank top. There were Hasidic men at the table. There were Orthodox women. It was just an incredible collection of human beings from different streams of life with different paths in life. And what united us all is that we followed and felt drawn to our beloved teacher, Danny, who has brought together people who love goodness and love the pursuit of goodness by being around good people his whole life. So it is an incredible honor to continue to be your student and to help host this gathering, which is a celebration of your work, your book, and just a chance for us to marinate in mitzvah work, mitzvah inspiration. So here's how this evening is going to flow. We have about an hour together, and I have some questions for Danny that he's going to reflect on for all of us. And then we'll have an opportunity to hear him read some of his poetry, and then some chance for him to teach a text in which we, of course, you know how Danny likes to teach. He will draw from the wisdom of this group, and we'll want to hear about your life stories, your insights, your reflections. And then, of course, we'll have a chance for a little bit of Q&A at the end. All right, sound good, Danny?
Yes, before you start with the questions.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. I'm looking at the screen. Hello, my Rabbi. I don't want to start playing. We're going to lose the whole hour if I start with Rabbi Klayman. I've been to Beth Meyer a number of times. And I just wanted to mention that about 3 trips ago, when Amy, the educational director, brought me in, we had a session in the sanctuary. There were at least 100 parents and kids there. And when it was over, it was so awesome how it worked that I told her it was really one of the best sessions I'd had in my career. Every time I've been there, of course, you guys have welcomed me very well and very nicely. But when you've been on the road as long as I have, you don't have to go to places you don't want to go to. So in this case, even though it's Zoom, when I contacted the rabbi, I said, would you like to do a Zoom thing? She said, sure. And I called her because it's one of the places I wanted to be. There's one other thing. Working with Rabbi Solomon, don't let it go to your head. Rabbi Solomon is one of my very favorite rabbis, but you shouldn't trust me because I only know about 500 rabbis. Only. Now, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, the 2 summers together, and we've stayed in touch. You probably get more emails with more. As soon as I'm through writing something new in the way of a Torah, there's Neil and there's my friend Rabbi Porath, and you're right there up at the top. I do want to clarify one thing with a story before I start. I was doing a talk somewhere in the South. This was maybe 20 years ago. And in the middle of a talk, a woman shouts out, "You're a Yankee." And I looked her right in the eye and I say, "Ma'am, I was born in Virginia. You know, you can call me a no-goodnik, you can call me a thief, but please have a little self-respect." In fact, while I'm at it, it'll only take 1 second. What's the difference between a northern and a southern zoo? Okay, and then I want to do Torah and all that stuff. A northern zoo, on the enclosure, there's a plaque that has the name, the Latin name, its habitat, its diet, and whether it's endangered. A southern zoo has its name, Latin name, habitat, diet, whether it's endangered, and a recipe. Okay, enough. Rabbi?
I never heard that one.
Well, we'll do another summer. Okay.
I love that you've expanded your repertoire.
Okay,
Fantastic. All right.
I'll be responsive to what you have to ask.
Fantastic. All right. So wanted to invite you first to elaborate on how you got involved in your mitzvah work. What prompted you to do so? What did you see or not as you looked out on the Jewish landscape?
First of all, when I talk to bar and bat mitzvah kids, and when I talk to my U.S. wires during the summers, 44 summers, and I tell them if they're 17 or 18, Avshalom just came on. You want to wave at him?
Hi, Avshalom. Baruch haba.
I tell them I didn't start doing any of this until I was 30. And these kids, if they're 17, they'd already been doing projects, even before they do bar and bat mitzvah projects and USY projects and so forth. I've met 7 and 8-year-olds who are doing astonishing types of things. So I tell them it was partly by chance. And I want to see some hands, even though I don't have faces everywhere. How many of you, before you went to Israel, somebody gave you $1 or $2 to give away? Bell, the Masters. Okay, got a few. It goes way back, all the way back to the Talmud, because the purpose is, the Talmud says, Shluchei mitzvah einan nizokin. Instead of it just being like when Rabbi Solomon and I were talking, when we started about going to Honolulu, you're not just going on a trip or a vacation, you're going on a I hate to use the UJA word or the evangelical word, you're going on a mission. You're doing mitzvah work. So I'd been to Israel in 59 with my rabbi, in 61 on pilgrimage, 63, 64 as a staff member. Judy will remember that. I was a staff member for her. And with my parents 2 or 3 other times, probably on my, I don't know exactly, probably my 7th or 8th trip. Instead of waiting for people to give me the money, I started asking people. I don't know why, and I don't really know why. In January 1975, I decided I had to go to Israel. There was no crisis. Nobody was bombing us at the time. There was no imminent war. There was no economic crisis in Israel. And I'd probably been there within the previous year. I can't reconstruct it. I did find my diary from there. And the first time I met people like the Rabbanit Kapach and so forth. So I started asking people. And before I left, I wound up with $955. I'd never had in my possession that kind of money. And while I did not go intending to zero in on what I call mitzvah heroes, I knew that with $955, I wasn't going to go to an institution that had a multi-million-dollar budget and get swallowed up. And I knew I certainly wasn't going to give it to a bigger in the street. Not that I'm against that, but you don't hand them $955. So the book has, by the way, and Neil and I decided we would reproduce my first tzedakah report. Back then when there were 6 lirot before the shekel to the dollar. And I spell out, we got flowers for this, and why the book became Jim's Shoes and Irises, and so forth and so on. So I gave out the money, and I felt that I owed it to, where is he, Harry? Harry Nadler was here before. Oh, he blanked himself. Harry's been in the thick of, for over 40 years, everything from ORT to running a JCC to running a federation in Indianapolis. Hi, Harry. He knows that if somebody donates, you tell them what you did with the money. And so I sent a letter to the people. Incidentally, with $955, the joke is there are at least 1,027 people who claim they gave me my first dollar. So I sent them the report, and I thought that was it. And that's when, if you'll excuse me, all hell broke loose, because they sent me $1,600 to give away on my next trip. That's, by the way, in 76 is when I started with pilgrimage, so that I got to Israel every summer. 955 to 1,600, then I went to 2,900, then I went to 6,000 something, and then I went to 12,000 and something, at which point somebody said the Internal Revenue Service is going to want to know about your receipts and all that kind of stuff. And that's why in 1981, we founded the Ziv Tzedakah Fund in America and Ziv Tzedakah Foundation in Canada, which still exists, is still functioning, and has given away close to $750,000 so far. So with the $12,000, then I had a fund, and we had a huge board of 3 people. My longest standing friend, Gordon, and my mother. And according to the IRS rules, you have to have a meeting at least once a year. And if we missed a year, I forced my mother, may she rest in peace, the Tzadeket of Arlington, to forge the minutes. Just make them up so we can put them in the file. Not that the IRS was going to come after me because, you know, they got bigger foundations to go after. So then it became a regular thing. Every summer I would be going to Israel. Every April's the stupidest time to send out an appeal because people have just paid their taxes. I don't know, maybe 15 years into it, I met somebody who said, I want to fund a November shortened newsletter that also brought in more money. We never fundraised. We never had banquets. Though every summer, Rabbi, had we already started having the Mitzvah Heroes dinners?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a vegetarian dinner at a place that's owned by two former Mitzvah Heroes. And we get everybody together and they schmooze. Avshalom brought one of his cats one of those times. And that's all. They get a chance to talk to each other and interact and make some new connections. We never gave out awards. You know, I could have had medals, you know, saying tzaddik. But none of them would ever wear it.
That's what I was going to say.
No, not a chance. I think out of all the years that I've worked with the greats, I think there's maybe, I'm not sure, only one that has an ego. That's it. We did, towards the end of when Ziv was running, we had 3 or 4 well-to-do people who, if we were looking for something like Avshalom's van kind of fell apart after having 8 million kilometers on it. And when you have to look for a big chunk of money like that, we had some people on call. But we never, in all the years of the Canadian and the American Fund, there were only 2 6-figure donations. And the bigger one was actually in Canada, just out of the blue. We got $1 donations. We got somebody sent, you know, I'm on Social Security, but here's a few bucks. We got from bar mitzvah kids. We got all kinds of things. If we say, sometimes we might say, we never put out a special newsletters. Oh yes, we did once. When our friend needed a liver transplant. And they wouldn't put her on the list. I can't remember what the reason was. And we needed to raise $300,000 very quickly. And her family put flyers at a big concert. And so within 3 days, we had 300 grand. That's the only time we ever did a fundraising drive. And it was interesting. Looking back, that's what people want me to do. Looking back and looking forward. I'm amazed. And I tell this to start-up mitzvah places. There are people that you are what they are looking for. One of my favorite new ones is called My Piece of the Puzzle. These 2 young women in Israel have put together for activities and other things, kids with special needs with at-risk kids. Who would have ever thought of something like that? And if I still had my access to, you know, a couple of $100,000, they'd get a chunk right away. But people had often said to us, we were looking for something like you. Not that they were against the ones they'd been normally giving to. And in the beginning, where's David? David Bell? David Bell was sent to me from the Jewish Federation of Houston many years ago because they wanted to bring me into retreat, and he had to check me out to see whether I was anti-federation, which some people would have thought because I was an independent. I had no objection to the federation. We certainly didn't have the kind of reach that they had. We could never raise that kind of money. I once said to myself, boy, wouldn't it be nice to have $1 million to give away? Well, we celebrated, first of all, when the total of what we had over the years gathered was $1 million. But the last 3 years of Ziv America, we had over $1 million to give away. 1 year, we had so much that if you did the math and you count 300 days of the year, because you don't give away on Shabbos and Yom Tov, that would be, we had over $1.5 million. That meant 5,000 on average, $5,000 a day I could give away. So when I'm talking to audiences, I look at a kid and I say, how would you like to have $5,000 to do tzedakah every day? And then I look at adults and I say the same thing and their eyes light up. Well, I was very fortunate that I was able to do that. They just came to people out of the blue. This was long before. Who remembers what the stink of the mimeograph correction fluid smelled like? Yes? And the white out and stuff like that, right? I always tell people what the sports jerks call March Madness was when Naomi Eisenberger, who was really the person who made the fund function and grow, when we had to start writing the April report. The final report was 52 pages and had more words in it than some of my books. No, I mean, a couple of the people, Arnie wrote some of the stuff and Neil wrote some of the stuff. But that's what the madness was, trying to report, put in one paragraph, my God, the kind of stuff that Miriam Mendelow did to found Lifeline for the Old, or Hadassah Levy taking in 40 infants with Down syndrome. Infants. Or try to describe Anita Shkady and what she does, and now she has a worldwide reputation with her therapeutic horseback riding. Or what Avshalom does with the dogs, the cats, and now rabbits, right, Avshalom? Rabbits and birds. Yes. So it started by, well, I'll give you one more piece. And then Jenny, Rabbi, you can ask the next question. The first mitzvah hero I met, though I didn't know what a mitzvah hero was at that time, was Mrs. Mendelow at Lifeline for the Old. How many of you ever met her? Yes, Masters did. Amy? Yeah? I can't remember what year she passed away, but by the time Rabbi worked with me, I don't think she was alive. She was short. With the U.S. Wire sitting in the courtyard on the ground, she would get up on a bench and lay it on them about how you treat old people. And how she started the first workshop by having old people rebind the books of elderly people to make the connection. I'd never met anybody like that before. And on the first trip, I know that there were 3 mitzvah heroes that I stayed in touch with for years and years and years. One was obviously the Rabbanit Kapach, who was the all-around mitzvah hero. And Avshalom would meet, at our dinners, when some of them, some of them were names to people, but then all of a sudden they were real people. When the chicken lady of Jerusalem in her early 90s, she died at 99, would come down the steps, people like, wow, this is the chicken lady. Sometimes I can't even remember her name. But once you meet the first one, then you're hooked. It's as simple as that. And the opposite side is I once talked to a student, and I still can't remember whether he had done 3 years at Penn or had graduated. I said, could you name me a professor that you look at and you say, that's the kind of person I want to be? No answer. I mean, and there he was surrounded, and Penn Taka's got a very fine faculty. But when I didn't want to be Mary Mendelow. I didn't want to be Hadassah Levi. I wanted to be, there was something in them that I wanted to find in me that I could do in my own integrated mind and talents and stamina to do. Because as I told, if I tried to go every day with Avshalom Benny and his therapy that he's doing with his co-therapists, the cats and the dogs, after 3 days, I would be a dish rag. And the same thing with all the ones that you had met along the way, Rabbi, because they're working with such intense people. And I think that's one of the things that goes with the virus. If anybody thinks that this can't be beat, you just take a look at some of the people we've been working with, and they've done what you say, how did they do that? Okay, can I one more example, and then you can go on to the next question, Rabbi. The woman who started the free dental clinic for kids in Israel. Her husband, she's a survivor of the camps. The story goes from her book that she was practically at the door of the gas chambers, and for some reason, the guard pulled her away. So she comes to Israel. She was German. And her husband worked for some union of workers. And he was getting burned out. So he goes to whoever the prime minister was at that time. He says, I'm going to take a break. So he goes he gets a job in Paris. And he makes a fancy place and wants her to be very happy there. Trudy. And she goes there and she's miserable. And so, you know the story. One day, she sees in the newspaper there is a meeting of the International Association of Dentists. She says, I'm going to go. And this, I hate to use the term, this is the gospel truth. She goes up to either the president or the guy running the convention. She says to him, give me 5 minutes. By the way, she was also short. The guy looks down at her and says, lady, who are you? She said, just give me 5 minutes. And he does. And he gets up there, she gets up there and she says, I want to start a free clinic for kids in Jerusalem. And I want volunteers. And here's where I start to lose it. And as soon as she says that, a man stands up and says, I'm your first volunteer. And by the time her husband gets home, there's a whole bunch of people at the place. What's going on? The next day, she calls Teddy Kolick, her friend, and says, I need a place to set up a dental clinic. Well, you never said no to her. There was an old firehouse that was not being used anymore. He gave it to her. And then she got all these people to renovate it, and for free, obviously. And she set it up. That's just the way, she could tell you afterwards, I didn't want any kid to suffer like I did. Meryl, you knew all these people too. Merrill spent a whole year there. So when you meet somebody like Trudy and Mary Mendelow and so many of the others, well, last one I'll tell you. The first person to work with mental illness in Israel was somebody who was ultra-Orthodox. His name was Reb Asher Freund. He set up a printing press for people, for the men, and for the women, a sewing workshop. I used to take the dresses around his demonstration. And the Ashkenazi shul in Yamin Moshe during the week was a yeshiva for people recovering from mental illness. In the early days of people working with children with limited mental capacities was a woman named Irina Gaster. Her father was Moses Gaster, the chief Sephardi rabbi of Great Britain. Her brother was T.H. Gaster, the great professor at Barnard for all those years. Well, she was all over the place. She was one of these people that, if you wanted to know about kids that did not have the same IQ as we did, you don't go to the professors, you go to her. Well, obviously you had to have somebody who could keep her work organized. So there was this woman called Eva Michaela Stern. That's the other woman my mother said I had to meet. First one, she said, you got to meet Mary Mendelow and Stern. Turns out the Stern's parents are in the Encyclopedia Judaica. In any event, a few years later, I went to see Mrs. Michaelis. I think she was in her early 80s. She was a German. She's what we call a Yeki. While we're talking, the phone rings. We're on our balcony. She goes inside, talks for 10 minutes on the phone, comes back, and I swear she finished the sentence, which is exactly what Irina Gaster needed in order to function and to get done what needed to get done. Your turn, Rabbi.
Hard to know where to go from here. You said so many things that really touched me. One of them is that after all these years, there's so many things I don't remember, but the feeling, the names, the images, even sometimes the words of those amazing mitzvah heroes that you introduced me and so many of us to over the years, it's like crystal clear, which is really says something in terms of how they made their mark. I remember you would teach a beautiful midrash about perfume and how somebody likes to go into a perfume store and how when you leave that store, am I remembering this right? You take some of the aroma with you. And so it is with these extraordinary souls. You encounter them and then you take with you some of their essence. And I think, Meryl, we may not have seen each other now for 30 years, but I do believe we sat around in a circle in Danny's apartment one summer studying text. And so I want to invite you, Danny, you absolutely have helped get tzedakah funds to these extraordinary people and find these extraordinary people doing amazing things. But one of the core pieces that has animated all of your work has always been Torah, sacred text, and you've always brought together the wisdom from our tradition and the way that it becomes manifest in these unique human beings. And so I'm wondering if you would share with us perhaps a text that is still living bright within you or is giving you energy in this moment. I can tell you that the texts that you taught me over the years are among my greatest treasures. They continue to guide my work, but much more importantly, my life.
Okay, well, before I forget, I did not get to it. Beth Meyer people, they're supposed to look, you've got these people in your congregation. And that's why Zoom doesn't do it. But I believe, and I just found it somewhere in the Gemara, but I can't remember where, you have to talk about the mitzvah work that you do. And so, I always wondered, why do they hire me to go talk about it? And everybody else is going to keep it quiet. How's anybody going to learn what you're doing? And want to join you. I was at this Reform temple. I don't want to tell you the town. The temple was so Reform, even the other Reform, there were 2 or 3 other big Reform places, and they thought they were really far out. They told me that in its heyday, if you wanted to have a bar mitzvah, you had to have it outside the synagogue. So they brought me into, they wanted to do a retreat weekend. And they wanted to talk about Tikkun Olam. And they said, here's the name of the woman who is the chairman of the Social Action Committee, but she's kind of low key. Okay, so I met her and I started schmoozing with her. She's like a home healthcare nurse or something. And she, not bragging, she mentions to me that she makes 75 Thanksgiving dinners, which she delivers to her people. I said this to the board later, and I said, did any of you know this? Not a single one. And among those people, I'm sure there were people who were ready to jump in and offer to make their dazzling Thanksgiving pies or stuffing and so forth to join her. But nobody else knew it. So I think within your own synagogue, and particularly your kids, should know. I mean, I remember when I was in Hebrew school, this was the mid-50s. We had a kid, I can't remember his name. His father was working on something having to do with a space program, rockets. Like, I would have loved to have met him, and that certainly would have blown my mind, but it still wasn't the mitzvah hero kind of stuff I was talking about. And then even text, do they have it in their chat, or we want to put it up? Can we? You just.
Yeah, you want to put in the text? Yeah, Julia, will you bring that up for us?
Yeah, sure.
Where's Julia? Oh, there she is. Jay, you had your face up before, you hit it now.
So the text is in the chat. Do you also want me to share my screen to share it?
Yeah, put it on the screen, okay? Now, I expect some of you hopefully will be able to respond. Okay, I'm going to do the first one and then hopefully the second one. It's a very interesting text. You all know the quote from Ecclesiastes. There's a time to embrace and a time to this. And time to embrace for us in USY meant when you're 15 years old and it's Havdalah, you finally get to hug the girls. Now, what the Midrash does, what it says, if you see a group of good people standing near you, you're supposed to stand up and you're supposed to hug and kiss them and hug them again. Now, I'd like some people to tell me, why do you think you're supposed to hug them twice? I mean, I'm not faking the translation. It says you got to hug them a second time. Why do you think? Steve, the masters, anybody? Let me get some other pictures. Toby, you got any ideas? Unmute yourself.
In the Torah, when a passage is repeated, it's repeated for emphasis.
So you're gonna hug them again to emphasize your affection for them or your admiration for what they're doing.
Their goodness, yes.
Just like when it says Avraham, the repetition is emphasis. That's good. That's one answer. How about a few more?
Danny?
Yes.
Hi. So looking at the world looking at it through just a everyday worldly view, if you're greeting someone out of politeness, you say hi, you give them a hug and go on. You know, sometimes you give a hug and it's a hug, but sometimes you give a hug and it connects. Okay? So it's said that if you hug someone for 20 seconds, it changes them. It actually changes the way that they feel, the way they connect, the way they think. A hug for 20 seconds can take a stressed person and change that and make them unstressed. So if you're hugging a person once, you're giving them a quick hug. Hi, how you doing? Here's a hug, hug, hug. But if you're hugging them again, you're making that connection to who they are, and it gives more meaning to it. It helps bring them to a different level.
I think you're absolutely right, Toby. And the opposite of it is, sometimes, you know, you see it in the movies and other things. When two guys are hugging, they'll grab each other and then they'll start patting themselves, the other guy on the back. It's like the opposite of what you're saying. It's like maybe they're a little too tentative to want to hug, as you put it, for 20 seconds straight. I think, wow, good. Anybody else? Give me one. Well, that's two.
I was going to say, if I may,
Amy,
that the first hug, you're hugging for them to say thank you. The second hug is for you, so that, you know, you sort of take in some of their righteousness.
by the way, I forgot to mention, anytime I do a text, there's new stuff for me. Amy, I never heard that one before. I think that's, whew. Huh. Very nice, because up until now, I'd always been thinking of it one directional. Huh. Sometimes, by the way, on the second hug, you get a much more emphatic hug from the person that you were hugging originally. So they're communicating back to you. Huh. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, taking some of their, oh, that's good.
I think some of the energy, as opposed to being, well, once we took a bunch of teachers to see the Rabbi Kappa, and there was a woman sitting next to her on the couch. And afterwards she said she felt this aura. Now, I'm not a mystic, but this is the Rabbi Kappa of the more than 100 mitzvah heroes I've met. The only person I knew that really did have a direct line to the Almighty was the Rabbanit. But that's a little too ethereal. I think, Amy, what you've said is you're getting that. It's not a Buddhist energy or anything like that. You can actually feel. Well, that's one of the terrible frustrations of what's happening here. Grandparents can see their grandchildren, but they can't hug them and they can't kiss them in some cases, depending on how meticulous they are. about safety. And that's terribly frustrating when they're used to being very huggy and kissy with the kids. And so the kids, when they grow up, are going to have this period of months or who knows how long saying, well, it just didn't happen.
Danny, my teens have been walking around saying they're going through hug deprivation, and they just keep asking me for longer and longer hugs. That's a silver lining for me.
Oh.
Yes, they're feeling it. They feel it in a very physical way. I feel it in a very physical way. There is absolutely something that is happening when we hug, as Toby said so beautifully, where our neurobiology shifts and we feel the closeness of human connection. My thought of hugging twice is when you feel that warmth and that connection, you let go perhaps because that's the normal social way. But once you feel that, you want that closeness again. And so you go back for a little more.
Or a lot more. I don't hang around with little kids a lot. I was going to speak at the Schefter in Baltimore at one point, and my great niece, who at that time, maybe in the third grade, they live in Columbia, so there's a van that picks them up. I'm standing outside with the principal, and on the way into the school, she comes over and gives me a hug. I mean, we sit next to each other at the Seder, and I listen to her. She comes up with a great Torah, because she'd never hugged me before, and it just, wow. Because I don't know what they think of their great Uncle Danny. It's not Uncle Danny, it's great. It's another generation far away. My brother was their grandfather. Anybody else? One more? Yes, sir. Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff Margolis here. I'll sort of offer a question that may lead to some more elucidation. Wondering how many times were the hugs and the kisses when Joseph, coat of many colors, reconciles with his brothers, and also when Jacob and Esau meet that second time? There is, I think, hugging and kissing and stuff like that. Don't know if I've added any illumination or not, but thank you for the chance to ask the question.
Oh, you raised a very important one. Well, there are two different things. One, Jacob and Esau is 1 and 1. Joseph has got 11 brothers. By the time you're through Shimon, Levi, Naphtali, Gad, and so forth, it's like some presidents in the receiving line were really good about all the shaking of the hands. And some of them said, my God, am I going to have to go through this again? But if there was, Jeff, I think that's a wonderful thing. If we, instead of just reading the text and imagining it, trying to get into the physicality of, after all, he was the second youngest, and I don't know the exact gap in ages, they don't tell us. But let's say, there's a big difference between my brother, may he rest in peace, was 22 months older than me. There were people who grew up where their older sister was 7 grades older. Not the same thing. So here you got Joseph, even though he's the big guy in Egypt, and one of his brothers is 15 years older than he is. My father grew up with 4 sisters. The oldest was 11 years older, and the youngest was 2 years younger. But when Grandma came over from the old country, Grandma was 30, and the 3 girls that she came, because Grandpa finally got the money to bring them over, were 11, 9, and 7. I try to picture my father surrounded by 4 girls you know, growing up? Did they fuss over him when he was a little baby? I don't know. My father was the first one born in this country. And I might add, approximately 9 months to the day after Grandma arrived to see Grandpa after a 4-year gap. So I figured the months. I wonder whether Aunt Anna and Aunt Frida and Aunt Seal babied Julius, my father. Aside from the fact that he was the first one in the family to go to college. But I think that image of Joseph going around, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Gad, and Naphtali, I used to know them all in order. By the time he's at number 8, if he knew Yiddish, he'd say, genug, enough, you know? But this is not just hello, goodbye. This is a reconciliation after all that time. And they had, according to one interpretation, they had sold him down the river. Wow. Jacob and Esau is another issue. You know, the Talmud does 2 things. You know, Esau is going to bite him in the neck. You know, there's all kinds of negatives and positives with that one. That's a little, I can't, that's a little tougher than me imagining. I can't imagine 12 kids in the family.
Danny, I want to be sure that we have some time to hear you read your poetry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so let's jump to that if you don't mind.
No, that's why you're the boss. Okay, the first one. Who remembers who Trevor Farrell was? There's the Masters, and Merrill, of course, Amy, of course. Jay, did you ever, the kid who took care of homeless people in Philadelphia?
Oh, right, yes. I do remember that.
He was the first video whenever I'd go and show. About 4 years ago, I spoke in New Jersey. And I said, what the heck, let's call Trevor and see whether he'll come. Well, this kid with the same face, only 6'3", walks into the room, and they asked him to talk about how he's doing now and how he started taking care of homeless people. You have to know this because he's the one that taught me the last paragraph, just because of who he was. Now, one more question. How many of you were taught that if you dropped a siddur or a chumash, you picked it up and kissed it? Let me see some hands. Julia, Jay, Toby, David, Meryl, Amy, Shalom. Sometimes you get so trained on it. I think I remember dropping the phone book once. And before I knew it, kissing the phone book. In any event, it's called With a Kiss. And you'll keep because the first time I met Trevor, I'd taken the train up to Philadelphia. And as I'm walking into the shelter called Trevor's Place, I look through this big front window, and there is this kid hugging one of the homeless people, whom we always called, they're my friends. Okay. It is the little acts positioned in the day that make us. The kissing in the fallen book, which doesn't feel. Not using the Chumash, the Talmud, as a thing to lean on for other words, be they poetry books or tax forms. They take no precedence. Watch where you lean. Not mistaking a pushka for a paperweight. kissing again the mezuzah as we pass through or pass from. Both passages are ordained. Be cognizant. The covering of challah till the time wine blessed, tasted, hands washed is right. The kissing again of tzitzit, the kissing of the Torah scrolls when they are marched by, the kissing yet again before closing of the siddur. From these, justice and menschlichkeit, lifting the fallen book, we may, just may someday, lift the fallen neighbor, the stranger who feels, with a kiss.
Beautiful. Yasher koach.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
I was not trained to kiss the mezuzah back and I was very impressed when I saw people closing a siddur or something that they kissed it. I did not know that either. And certainly, I remember one more Trevor story. They're making the rounds. They have a van with food and drink and so forth. After they went to their regular stop and they went around scouting out things, there's a young woman sitting out there on a flimsy suitcase. And Trevor, this kid, who at that time was about 14, says, "Okay, Danny, go out there and see if she's hungry." And I kind of looked at him like, De Niro, you talking to me? You want me to leave the safety and the warmth of this van and go talk to this person out there? Well, you don't, just like with Trudy, you don't mess with people like that. So I went out and I asked her, "Are you hungry?" And she said, "No." "Would you like some hot coffee or chocolate, hot chocolate, whatever it was?" She said, "Yes," and I brought it to her. I didn't ask her life story, didn't ask her why she was out there, didn't ask how old she was, didn't ask how lousy is it living on the streets. But this kid, starting at age 11, did it. Every night they went out for 10 years. And by then there were literally a few hundred Philadelphians that were joining him. Interesting. No, I just started with, I started with the book. You dropped the book. And then everything else fell into place. Can I read the other one?
Go ahead.
Yeah. How many of you know the Midrash that if you're planting a tree and somebody says, the Mashiach is coming, you're supposed to finish planting the tree first and then go run after the Mashiach? Yeah, Ellen, you knew that one? Jay? Huh. Amy? Toby, yeah. Steve? It's a long road from learning it and then winding up with a poem. I'm not bragging or anything like that. Because I'll tell you before we read the poem, the Aramaic is not so clear. Somebody says the Mashiach is coming. Is he coming towards you? Is he or she at a distance at that point? Are you just, how many of you ever planted a tree in Israel? Right? You remember? Little sapling. The first one I planted was 1961. But we always thought, some cat is going to come along and step on my sapling and it'll never grow. It looked like such a pathetic thing. So trying to picture it made it difficult. Hey Lecha Mashiach means, it could mean the Mashiach is here. You know, if I open up my door when somebody knocks, I only know it's a guy delivering a package. And somebody says, you know, the Mashiach's here. What? Where? What? He's down in the lobby. Come on. Drop everything. Well, let's see what the Midrash says. If you're planting a tree and someone comes and says the Mashiach is coming, then plant. No matter what reasonable people or foaming enthusiastic youths tell you, this Messiah or that Messiah is imminent, plant. The Mashiach is in no rush. When you have patted down the last clods of dirt and watered your maple, your sycamore, your elm, he will still be wherever he is supposed to be and more than happy to admire the sapling with you. Messiahs don't come to uproot things. If he wanted to, he could bundle Eretz Yisrael into a package and bring it to you. So you would not have to go wandering again through many lands. If he really is the Mashiach, this one everyone pesters you about, he will bring you Abraham, who will sit by your tree and dispense dates and the flat bread of hospitality as in ancient days. So plant it now firmly, water it well, whether or not there is a Messiah, today or tomorrow. Most of you who have read my stuff, you know, the opening poem in some of my books is, if you always assume the person sitting next to you is the Messiah waiting for some simple human kindness, you will come to weigh your words and watch your hands. And it turns out he's not the Mashiach. It doesn't matter. So this is the great Tikkun Olam poem. Just go do your planting. I find it very powerful, though it's only long after I wrote the poem that people started asking me to visualize. If he's breathing down your neck, would you really? Look, if somebody said to you tomorrow, if you go to your local clinic, there's going to be a coronavirus vaccine. And somebody says, well, look, I got to finish my emails. What do you think the odds we're going to do that? So that's what this poem was about. I think I had in the background people saying that the Russian Revolution is Mashiach or whatever. Yes, ma'am. Did you have any other questions, Rabbi?
Well, I think we're going to close for this evening, but this is this is what I wanted to close with. As I was anticipating our time together tonight, Danny, I was just sort of flush with the many people that you've introduced me to over my life and the many pieces of Torah. And in just taking 2 minutes to write them down, I will just share these short pieces of Torah with you. And I share them back to you as a gift, not only because they're beautiful, but so that you'll know that the effect of your teaching continues to live on in me. And I know that I'm really speaking for so many of us gathered here tonight. I very easily remembered that mitzvahs are here to refine my soul. I remembered what you said about not casting the elderly away and remembering that they are like tablets, broken tablets, and that we must put them in the ark and take good care of them. I remember that Jewish leadership is difficult, and still Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lived a long life.
Yes.
A lot about that one. I remember that tzedakah is stronger than death. I remember how to relate to people in need with seichel, with insight, with wisdom, with relationship. I remember that Moses was picked to be a leader because he followed after the stray sheep and put him on his shoulder and carried him back to the group.
Mm.
And I remember that Torah ends with acts of loving kindness and also begins with acts of loving kindness. Those are the bookends of the Torah. And I remember that when we say goodbye or when we witness the performing of a mitzvah, we don't say thank you. We say niskele mitzvot or tizke or tizkila mitzvot. May we merit the privilege of getting to do more mitzvahs together. And I believe that in my own theology, all these beautiful things that you've taught us and that you've helped us find the people to teach us, we don't have to do these things. We get to do these things. What an incredible, incredible privilege and merit to be alive, to live this one precious life, and to get to bring more goodness into the world. And we have so much gratitude for you, Danny, for the beauty and the goodness you've brought into our lives. And we're grateful to have this chance to remember what the seeds that have already been planted, but need tending and nourishing. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to remember that just in spending some time with you this evening. So I want to thank everybody for gathering tonight. Julia, if you will put in the chat box just one more time, because people have come on at a later point in the Zoom call, to put on again the link to Danny's book. It's a really precious volume. Encourage everyone to have it in your library. Nice. Steve is holding up his copy.
And JPS gives a 40% discount.
There we go. A sale. Who could refuse that? Really, Danny, thank you for spending time with us this evening. May we all go forward into this year ahead, renewed with energy, mitzvah energy, energy for tzedek umishpat, for goodness and righteousness. Each of us in our own special, unique way that only each one of us can do. All right, Laila Tov, everyone. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Boy, Jenny.
Bye, Michael. Bye, Michael. Hi, Danny. Bye, Danny.
Bye, Amy. I meant to send you a little chat. Good to see you.
It's good to see you as well, Michael.
Thank you so much for hosting this.
Rabbi, when you do your book, I'll be happy to be the moderator and let you. Woo, boy, you threw 6 different texts at us. I hope some of you, Rabbi Klayman and so forth, if you want to have the rabbi's address, email address, and to link up, I'll be happy to send it to you. Okay, guys, this was...
Pleasure meeting you, Rabbi. Bye, Danny.
Thank you.
Laila Tov, everyone.
Tov.
Thank you.
Big hug.
Bye.
Good night, Danny. Great to see you again. Be
nice
well.
to see all of you. And mazel tov on this new job.
Thank you.
If you can send a flyer with information about it, you know, something as an attachment to tell me more, I'd love it.
I haven't written anything like that yet, but I can send you the link to the website.
Oh, great. Okay.
I will do that. Be
Okay,
well.
guys. Laila Tov time for
Laila.
Late for Danny.
Avshalom. Go to sleep already. It's late.
In Israel. Yeah, okay.
It's early.
Nice job,
Good
Rabbi.
night.
Thanks a lot.
Lovely, lovely evening.
Meryl, did you say hello to Avshalom? You're on that part of the screen.
Let's unmute you people.
I tried to say hello to Avshalom, but I couldn't chat with him. So off the Avshalom, hi. Hi. There you are. There you are. Oh my God. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Okay.
We're kissing through the screen now.
Hi, Glenn.
Hi, Meryl. How you doing?
The mask. Thank you for taking off your mask. Okay. Avshalom, stay healthy, please. Okay. Rabbi, thank you for doing this.
Great.
Well, then, Meryl, you may know each other more or longer than I knew him.
Who, me and Glenn?
Yeah.
Yeah, Glenn and I go back since we're in elementary school together.
Oh, my.
He lived around the corner from me. He's younger than I am, though.
Much younger.
Much younger, much younger. Right. Happy birthday to your mother, Glenn.
Thanks. Say hi to Greg and the
I
kids.
will. Thank you.
All right.
Shalom. It's so good to see
Carol,
you.
it was great seeing you, Danny.
Take care. Take care.
Oh, it's so
Puppies.
great. So special to have you with us, Avshalom.
No, what you said is that we really get to do the mitzvot, and everyone that we no mitzvah, whatever we are, thinks we're doing a mitzvah. When you hug somebody, it's what Amy said. You're hugging them for them, but you're hugging them for you because they gave back to you even more than what you gave.
Totally.
It really, and we're all looking for a way to do something. It was a beautiful closing. I was very moved. And Danny, thank you for the history.
Yeah.
Everything. It was a beautiful night.
Just beautiful.
My daughter's dog.
Right.
Beautiful.
Avshalom, we thought you'd at least hold up one of the cats or the dogs.
I'll give you your own session later, Danny, with cats. That does it. You should know that, everybody. You bring him a cat and you've conquered his soul.
Avshalom, you're capable of hosting something, aren't you? Don't you?
Yes.
Oh, I'm just curious. Okay.
We can do something later. Zoom is the closest thing we have to a hug now, so that's
Good night.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov, everybody.
Night, Avshalom.
Bye-bye. Wonderful to see you again.
So, Danny, you must just be aching to get back to Israel.
You might say that.
Yeah.
It's, as I told people, this is the first time in 45 years I haven't had my birthday there.
Yep. Sad.
And particularly since last year was, my 75th. And I had such a nice chevra.
Good walk.
Avshalom was there and Alice was there. And what about 24? Porath was there. Jimmy Lebo was there. About 25, 30 people.
Wow. The Hadassah walk, they walked with you?
I'm sorry?
They walked with you to Hadassah?
Jonathan, he had a little trouble with his ankle or his foot or something. So we stopped that about 3 years ago.
Oh.
But we used to do it. I mean, ever since they have this gas station at the bottom of the last hill up, and I get a cappuccino, then it's a piece of cake. We had some good times. I think sometimes when we did it, there were more than just a couple of us.
Yeah.
That went up. I forget, who knows. He liked to walk later, but we would start at what, 5 o'clock in the morning or something.
Something like that. Now I'm one of those early people, Danny. I get up at 5 every day. It's the best. Those morning hours are so sweet.
This morning I had, I guess it's the Adderall. I had about 3 hours. And at a certain point, and like Rabbi Klayman and I have been having an exchange, he keeps coming up with these fabulous reactions to some of the text I send him. And you don't just shoot a one line back to him. So there were a bunch of them. And Rabbi Joel Roth, whom my brother knew from when he was working on his PhD in Highland Park, New Jersey, I had to write him, tell him it was my brother's first yard site already. Mm. And we had a bit of an exchange. He didn't know. My brother was a few months away from 30 years of teaching between Mincha and Ma'ariv on Shabbos.
Wow.
And when they started it, they said, they'll never get a minyan. He'd teach for half an hour or something like that. I sat in once, he was teaching Psalm 23 or something. It's old hat.
No such thing.
By the time I was through with him, as I joked with people, He had the largest collection of Dikduk books in all of Montgomery County, aside from other things. But it was hard, you know. My brother used to go over and study Torah with Joel. They had great affection for him. I can't remember whether it was my sister-in-law or myself that had to tell him that Stan had passed away. Yeah. In any event, this was, you ran it perfectly because you knew when to move on to whatever the next thing was. And you let me, at the opening, go wandering in the various things I had to cover. Your closing covered at least 6 texts. It was...
I could quote back 100 more, Danny.
No, but I understand, but it was... Yeah.
I learned more from you than I did in rabbinical school. Let's just put it that way.
Well, for some people, that doesn't say much. No.
Fair.
and you know, I don't joke when I write you Morati.
I know.
You just have to get used to it, okay?
Okay.
That's
I'll play along, but you'll always be the rabbi in the relationship. That's for sure.
Tell me what years you worked with me again? You had a gap one year.
I think it was 94 and 96.
And Neil was in both.
Yes. And we had Ari with us one year and Ronit.
Uh-huh. Ronit is the one that would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and take walks with me.
Yes.
It's Dr. Ronit.
I know.
I saw her when I was in Vancouver a few years ago.
Oh, that's great. We're Facebook friends now, so we get to see each other.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. She has like 2 kids. Tell me again, your oldest is 18?
Almost. She's going to be a poll worker in a couple weeks. Isn't that great?
Well, Jan has been out a couple of times. They have a Democratic club in their group with signs on the street corners. And they did early voting in Texas. I'm going next Monday.
Wow, great.
She voted, I want to do it in person.
Okay. I love that. It's a mitzvah.
And the last Democratic meeting, they had a wonderful session on how do you have a conversation with a Trumper? And she used to teach that when she ran HR. But then she explained back what they got with, 3 categories of people, some, with the gun rack on the back of their truck.
Yeah.
Another, but it was, and she said it, some places have been very long lines. There have been lots of people early voting.
Yes.
Since most people not most people, a lot of people don't trust any other way than just going and doing it yourself.
Yep. I know. All right, Danny, we both have to get up at 5. Let's call it a night.
I can't thank you enough, dear.
It's great to see you.
Say hello to Eric for me, please.
I will. Here's to the day when we can enjoy another meal and reach into each other's plates.
Another free meal for me.
Fair enough.
Okay. Laila Tov, Yasher Koach, Nizkel and Mitzvot.
Amen. Bye. Good night.